In 2016, a man from California contacted the Mutual UFO Network with regards to an amazing story related to him by his father some 5 years earlier. His father was involved with the Norwegian Navy Special Forces, a deep-sea diving specialist, between 1968 and 1974. In 2011, the father opened up to his son about something very strange he encountered while working as a deep-sea diver for the Norwegian Navy. I expected to hear some Cold War stories about Russians and USA and such, as he did a lot of ops in the northern region of the Atlantic Ocean. So what he told me this day blew my mind, the man wrote in his letter to MUFON. According to the father, in 1973, he was stationed at the coastal town of Bergen, spending much of his time training. One day he was called away from his unit's training routines, was quickly airlifted by helicopter off to one of the major fjords on the west coast of Norway. Fearing repercussions for his father, the author did not disclose the exact location details in his public statement, but did so to MUFON in private. As the helicopter drew near to the destination point, the father could see there, in the middle of the fjord, several Navy vessels were waiting, clustered, as if searching for something. Almost immediately the father thought this was strange, as the Norwegian Navy generally did a decent job of keeping up with what went in and what came out of these fjords. Further, the area was mostly cruise boat and tourist territory. There were no known military installations nearby, so special operations and training was not likely to be conducted there. On board one of the Navy ships, the father and another fellow deep-sea diver whom he did not know were put into oxygen, helium, deep divers equipment, a sign that they were not just going surface diving, but that something more serious was underway. They were also given underwater military camera equipment. This is when things got very mysterious. The command gave them clear instructions: document, observe, report, and debrief. And as they began lowering them down to a depth of approximately 200 to 350 feet, it became very obvious, at least to the father, what they were there to document. There on the ocean floor were two deep track grooves, like the tracks from some kind of belted device like a bulldozer or a tank or some other similar belted vehicle. They were massive, more than 30 feet wide, and that was just one of the tracks. The two tracks ran parallel, and both were more than 30 feet wide. On top of that, there was a permanent wide gap between them, approximately 30 to 50 feet across. The father likened it to a gigantic caterpillar bulldozer crawling forward through the bottom of the fjord. Quote, "My father told me it immediately struck him, this being 1973, as very chilling, as it dawned on him that there are no known machinery or vehicle remotely close to the size of these tracks that can move about underwater in this fashion, and to his knowledge there is still no such vehicle that has been made to this date." Unquote. After orienting themselves, they were told by Surface Command to film, take pictures, and memorize all details of the gigantic caterpillar track as they were to follow it out through the fjord. This is when things got even weirder. As they moved along documenting one man per track, they had to use their strong military-grade flashlights just to be able to see the whole width of the track. It went on forever into the underwater horizon, the man's father told him. The father believed that whatever made these tracks, it was intelligent. There was no scraping or drag mark grooves that would have suggested something huge like a platform being hauled, noting that very often platforms are built in these fjords because of the extreme depth and the calm waters, then towed off to open sea upon completion. This was no tow job. This object had rolled forwards as if someone driving a bulldozer through a varied and uneven landscape, leaving two massively steady deep tracks in its wake with a total width of more than 100 feet, the man wrote. The two divers swam for a long time documenting the absurd monster groove when all of a sudden it just stopped. The father and the other diver were puzzled. Quote, "It looked like the object had just been lifted straight off the seafloor. This after having documented the track being more than 3 kilometers long. There was no trace of it further out the fjord." Unquote. They were immediately called back to the surface to debrief. Shortly after, the father was airlifted off the group of ships and returned to the base without any explanation as to the origin of this track or the overall purpose of the mission, something that the father found to be a little strange. He never heard a single thing about that particular mission again. Within a year, the father was headhunted for the offshore oil industry, doing extreme deep-sea diving during the settling of the oil fields in the North Sea between England and Norway. He ultimately retired from his military career. The son believed that the sudden headhunting into the oil industry, the money and the constant work so soon after the Fjord incident was somebody's attempt at redirecting his father's attention away from what he observed that day. The man would work for 20 years as an offshore deep-sea diver specialist before finally retiring. Quote, "My father never really shown any interest in the USO UFO phenomena and theories out there, and I cannot recall one single time in my entire life that he has mentioned such things apart from this one day in his garden. In his own words, he explained it as something completely foreign to our technological capability, both now and then," unquote.